I got into my own chocolate business. It was a good distraction, but I was eating the profits. I started to put on a little bit of pounds, but also just mental health stuff. Depression mainly was a real struggle. I didn't think chocolate was an issue for me until I tried to stop. And it was really tough because I failed at every form of moderation. Quit sugar for 30 days. Within 3 days, I felt fantastic. My energy was back. I felt better. I was less depressed. My weight just dropped like a plummet. And as soon as I went to abstinence, this is easy. So it immediately cut the physical cravings. I didn't feel comfortable making and selling a product that I knew was not healthy. I literally closed my doors. I look back at my 20s and 30s where life was quite tumultuous, and I think how easy that would have been if I hadn't been on that sugar roller coaster. I keep feeling more benefits as the years go on. It's endless. So I feel amazing. It was hard at first to be different when you're not eating the junk. Now I embrace it.
Okay, good morning. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. Today we have one of our special regulars telling us her success story. Lark, good morning. How are you today?
Morning, Shawn, and good to say good morning, and it's not 2 a.m. Good to be in the US for this.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the shirt, by the way. What is it? Eat meat and what? Don't do stuff. leave it PG. Good for you. Anyway, I've had the pleasure of meeting Lark in person, and you've been coming in this community for, a couple of years now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, by your accent, Australia. So why don't we get started? Just tell us a little bit about your history and your background, and we'll see where that goes.
Sure. I've been on Revero, previously MeatRx, for 3 years, and I'd already been carnivore for 18 months when I came on at the start of 2020 and heard you on HBO, Human Performance Outliers with Zach Bitter. Was following you. I'd been keto for about 3.5 years, and people like yourself talking about carnivore were popping up on my keto podcasts. And so then I went down that rabbit hole of carnivore and watched you and saw your interview on Joe Rogan, many of us, and did the first 18 months just myself, but started to get into the weeds a little. And by 2020, it's like I really needed the support. And Revero, MeatRx, Revero had just started and got in. And here I am.
Still plugging along. And
Still loving it.
I'm always amazed when I see you in Australia at 3 o'clock in the morning coming to these meetings. I'm like, oh, goodness, I don't know that I would do that, but good for you. Hey, let's go back to...
Well, Shawn, it was lockdown. I was in the world's longest lockdown state, right? 272 days. Yeah. One of our lockdowns was 112 days. So you guys kept me going. I wasn't sleeping well. It was great to wake up in the middle of... It wasn't great to wake up in the middle of the night, but if I did, it was great to talk to people internationally. So I really appreciated the support. That was really important.
Glad we could help you through that. I know it's been a challenging, stressful time, I'm sure. Let's go back to, you said you did keto. So let's wind the clock back and say, where were you at? What made you even decide to change your diet? What was going on in your life?
11 years ago, I was, in my 40s? Oh, I always lose track of the time. No, I was 52. I got to 52 and I had gained weight. I had depression, anxiety, probably, but mostly depression. I felt really unwell. I had zero energy. I just woke up one day to the point where something's wrong. My health is really not good. I didn't have anything diagnosable at the time. I'd been in grief for about 8 years. I'd lost the death of a partner, and I had soothed myself with food, right? Sugar and carbs. And for me, it was chocolate. So after a career in education and the military for some 6 years and all sorts of interesting stuff, I got into my own chocolate business, making chocolates, teaching chocolate making. It was joyful. It was a good distraction, but I was eating the profits. And I'd always loved sweet food as a kid. I was very sporty. I was very thin. I could eat whatever I liked and it never showed on my body. But once I got into my late 30s, I started to put on a little bit of pounds, but also just mental health stuff. Depression mainly was a real struggle, and the blood sugar highs and lows. I didn't think chocolate was an issue for me until I tried to stop. I never worried about the sugar that I ate in my 20s because I burned it off and I just kept eating it. So I didn't know how addictive it actually was to me. When I started to attempt to change my diet, then I realized just how addictive it was. So at 50 something, 51, 52, I heard an interview with Sarah Wilson, who wrote a book. I think hers was Sweet Poison wasn't hers. She was talking about the dangers of sugar. And I was in my chocolate kitchen making chocolates. I had this commercial kitchen attached to my house, and I heard her interview and talking about the dangers of sugar. And I thought, okay, I'll look into this. So I downloaded her little ebook. She talked about David Gillespie, who is an Australian guy who calls himself a recovering lawyer. He gained 45 kilos, which in pounds is going to be, 100 plus. And lost it by giving up sugar. In particular, glucose was his thing. He thought that fructose was the dangerous part of sugar. Anyway, read his book, decided there and then to just give up sugar for 30 days. Wasn't going to do it forever, just 30 days.
Yeah, interesting. A lot of people say there's no such thing as a sugar addiction or things like that or food addiction. I say successfully give up sugar for 30 days and see how hard it is. And a lot of people start to realize that it's much more challenging than they think it is. And I want to you mentioned something I'd never heard from you before, at least I don't think I have. You said that you were in the military for a period of time. Is that true? Tell me a little bit about that. What prompted that?
I was an education officer for 6 years. In the Australian Army.
And what were you educating? What were you educating on?
Mainly literacy. I'm a linguist and literacy educator. And in that part of my career, I was teaching them literacy skills so that the non-commissioned officers could be promoted and increase their education. Many of them had left school pretty early and didn't consider themselves good at school. And I love teaching, I love learning, and I'm a really good teacher, which I think is why I'm a good learner. And so I worked with them for 6 years and education officer. It was great. I love the physical stuff. I was always sporty. It was a challenge. I had to do all the basic training and that sort of thing. And it was a great time of learning. I've always been an educator. So after I did that, I started as a primary school teacher. Then I taught adult literacy. Then I did the military education officer stuff. And then I got into deafness as a field, and that became my passion for 10 plus years, became an interpreter, got my higher degrees, and then was training and researching in deafness and training teachers and that kind of thing. So that was my passion up until my late 40s. I was education for 30 plus years.
Yeah, interesting. And you said you'd always, as a kid, you'd like any kid, you give them candy, they're going to eat unlimited candy. All kids do, basically. And so what you said you were basically fairly slim until sometime in your 30s. What do you think? Did your diet change? Did just activity level change? What changed to lead you to gain weight? And did you try other techniques to lose it from 30 to, I guess, 50? Was there any kind of things you tried?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So as a kid, I was into sport. So I was state level, national level in my sport, which is table tennis. Please don't call it ping pong. And that was what I used to run around as a kid. So that kept me completely skinny, I think. And obviously in the military for 6 years through my 20s, that was also very active. So by my 30s, I was teaching. So I wasn't quite as active physically as those other jobs in the past. I think it was just metabolism change. I think it was just the metabolic changes that sugar and high carbohydrate causes just caught up to me. And I had a degree probably of insulin resistance. There was stress, obviously, there was grief, 8 years of grief, and leaning into sugar because sugar used to make me feel better. It made me feel good. It works as a drug. And so it didn't catch up to me until those later years. Yes, I tried everything, like people and watching who've tried everything for weight loss. For me, I tried everything to quit sugar and chocolate. And so I would try and moderate because I figured you need to eat sugar, right? You need to eat fruit and grains and a little bit of junk food. I thought junk food was the problem. And so I just tried to cut down on the sugar and the chocolate, and I just couldn't moderate. So I would put crosses on a calendar, how many sugar-free, chocolate-free days I'd had, but I was still consuming potatoes and bread and all sorts of other sugary stuff that was obviously keeping my sweet tooth alive. And it was really tough because I failed at every form of moderation. I had a partner who was a psychologist who attempted to really help me with this and get over it, but he was a moderator. He didn't know about the whole moderation abstinence in terms of sugar. And so that just made me crazy because I just kept failing week after week. He even would eat chocolate in front of me with me to try and help us just enjoy it. Let's just enjoy it together rather than a guilty pleasure or something that I'm going to feel bad about. It just never worked. It was hellish. It was horrible. So at some point I obviously gave up, and then he passed away, and I got out of academic work, got into the business, and just had free range to hundreds and hundreds of kilograms of chocolate the other side of the lounge room door.
Yeah, that's got to be tough, living next door to a chocolatier and always being surrounded by that and yet being addicted to it. I'd be like a cocaine addict living in a cocaine factory or something. But you mentioned one of the things about sugar we've seen, it has a soothing effect. And even little babies that are distressed, a lot of people will put sugar on their finger and put it in the mouth, and this often has a calming effect. So it does have an effect on us that, like I said, it's very easy to get addicted to. And you mentioned moderation doesn't work. And I think the physiology, it's hard to fight human physiology when you're used to regular amounts of glucose, fructose, sucrose, whatever it is coming in, and then you don't have it as much. It's tough. And so you have to switch. You have to switch to, as we all know, we can preferentially burn a little bit more fat and not require as much glucose. So that occurs. Now, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak? Why did you decide at age 51, 52, I'm going to go low carb or keto or something like that, or whenever it was?
Yeah, so at 52, I decided to just quit sugar for 30 days. It wasn't a struggle in the business until I decided to stop eating sugar. Before that, I didn't think it was a problem. So I had a ball. It was great. Then at 52, I ran the business for 10 years, and probably 7 years in, I'm like, okay, I'll try the 30-day challenge. Within 3 days, I felt fantastic. My energy was back. I felt better. I was less depressed. My weight just dropped like a plummet. For the next 9 weeks, I lost 35 pounds in about 9 weeks. It just literally fell off me day by day. I didn't even know about low carb at that point, Shawn. I was still eating potatoes at night with dinner, and meat and 3 veg was what I grew up with. I just literally removed the chocolate, the added sugars. I went through my pantry and I got rid of the sauces that were full of sugar that I used to love and put on my food. But that's all I did. I didn't know anything about low carb. So the weight came off and I felt fantastic. I'm like, damn, what am I going to do now? I can't go back to eating that way because that's ridiculous, right? I feel great. And yet I've got a chocolate business that's now my life and career, and I've put my time and money and effort into that. What do I do? So I spent the next 18 months almost exploring every alternative to basically try and bargain my way out of this. That, okay, I'm not going to have sugar. I'm not going to have fructose and sucrose. What other sweeteners can I use so that I can keep making chocolate? Because I enjoy that. And maybe that I can also eat something that's a little sweet tasting. So I tried every conceivable alternate sweetener. I could name them all. Those lists that say, these are actually the real sugar, these things are still sugar, xylitol, erythritol, monk fruit, glucose, on and on. And sugar works really well in making chocolate. Those alternate sweeteners are really tough to make good chocolate with. And I was making high-end Belgian couverture chocolate. It was great. So I managed to nail something that was acceptable as a sugar-free or a sugar alternative chocolate. And I established a nice little niche market in that. It was actually using glucose. It was just removing the fructose. But then I started to overeat that. And so the weight started to come back a little. The depression started to come back. And so by my 54th birthday, I came home from a family lunch and I was really depressed again. And I'd put back maybe a third of what I'd lost. And I thought, okay, I went to Dr. Google, and very happily I discovered Professor Tim Noakes' work. And I watched a video of his and I loved it. And coming from an academic background myself, I know how rare it is for a scientist or an educator or somebody who's built their career on a particular finding to actually be honest enough to say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Here's my book, The Law of Running. Here's the chapter on carb loading, and he rips it out. and says, I apologize. I've got a lot of ground to make up for that mistake. And so I so admired and respected his approach. I went low carb the next day. I went, right, I'm going low carb keto. I hadn't heard of it before. He called it banting. I did an online course. I did a coaching course in low carb just because I wanted to learn more about the science. And then I followed that up a month or two later with Karen Thompson's Sugar-Free Revolution. You've interviewed both, also South African. And that's where I was introduced to moderation or abstinence. And I'd never considered that you could cut out a whole food group, which we now know is not maybe it is, carbohydrate, a whole macronutrient group, that you can cut that out completely. And as soon as I went to abstinence, this is easy. Like, this is seriously easy. I can do this. So it immediately cut the physical cravings. But what I can tell you that then 3.5 years of keto, moving more towards dirty keto, trying to recreate breads and pastries and desserts with nut flour, alternate sweeteners, because at that time they were quite happy with erythritol, xylitol, and one other, what was the other, stevia, saying they're low carb sweeteners, they'll be fine. So I started to abuse those, overdo those, and I got to the end of 3.5 years keto. I still had I had half of the issues I'd started with. So keto got me half the way. I started with about 30 symptoms of what I considered to be not optimal health, and I can rattle through some of those. Keto got rid of half of those, but then at the end of keto, I was still in trouble. I was like, okay. And the main thing that actually propelled me to go carnivore was weak bones. I got tested and I came back as having osteopenia, and I thought, okay, keto's not enough. I'm doing resistance training as well as the low carb. It's not enough. I need to go further. And that's when I jumped into carnivore. And carnivore got rid of the next 13 of the 15 symptoms that I'd felt.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, if you just maybe highlight a couple of ones that keto got rid of and the ones that they didn't, that you were able to resolve on carnivore, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay. That's going to be tough to divide them between. I can tell you what I got left with carnivore. Wow. What did keto help with? Keto helped with a lot, but now I can't even remember which ones were the non-carnivore ones. That's an interesting question. I can tell you what I got left with after keto. And it might have been that, so keto helped with the cravings, but then I was still consuming sweeteners. So I hadn't battled the full sugar kind of war. I hadn't won that one. I felt better. I loved the food. It was easy for me. My energy was good. I think my depression was less. I still probably had some. But by the end of keto, I can tell you that I had severe back itchiness, like skin itchiness, that would drive me crazy. I would have back scratches everywhere in my house and my car, and that was intense. I was still getting seasonal allergies. I was still a little bit above my ideal weight. I still had some depression. I started to get joint inflammation, arthritis in my hands. I had swollen knuckles on a couple of fingers. I still had what's called the Achilles tendonitis. I had a sore knee. I had bursitis in one hip. I had some backaches. So those things came and went. They were better than before keto, but I still had them. Constipation, gum disease, still a number of things, right? About 15 things like that. So I went carnivore to help my bones. Now, that's obviously a long-term thing that you're not going to be able to measure quickly. So I knew that. My plan was actually to go 6 months elimination diet onto meat, basically carnivore, strict carnivore, 6 months, and then slowly reintroduce the keto foods one by one to see what I might be reactive to. Because carnivore, within days and weeks, the depression lifted completely. The skin itchiness improved by 95%. My joint inflammation disappeared almost completely within just weeks and months. So I was getting and my energy was great, and everything was terrific. But I thought, okay, let's do this for 6 months, eliminate whatever foods are triggering me, and then just add them back. But that experiment did not go well. I tried to do it like a scientist, add in one food at a time, start with something innocuous like cauliflower, which you can do 1,000 things with as a keto person, because I love keto. I enjoyed it. I'm a foodie and I could bake and cook and have fun. But it went basically within about a week or two, it went cauliflower, sweet potato, fruit, honey, stevia, chocolate.
Chocolate, okay.
And I was just back in the weeds, just like that. It was just amazing. So that second year where I say I was 90% carnivore, but the other 10% was chocolate, sugar and chocolate. And I never gave up on carnivore, but I kept falling back into the chocolate sugar thing. At first, every few weeks, maybe I'd go 3 weeks without it. And I'd maybe then eat sugar or chocolate for 3 days in a row. Then I'd pull myself back and I'd have another 3 or 4 weeks carnivore. And the interesting thing in that year that was really hard, where I kept falling back into sugar, even though I was basically trying to do carnivore 100%, is that it had broken the physical cravings. Carnivore does that really quickly, but the mental, emotional track in my brain, that when my emotions would drop or I'd have stress or anxiety or just feel unhappy or uncomfortable, my brain just went, I know what will cure that. And unfortunately, sugar still does that. It will cure that. If I'm feeling low, if I'm feeling anxious, it's a drug that works for me. But it doesn't work medium or long term, bad consequences.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was last week I was in the UK lecturing, and they were talking about food addiction, and one of the psychiatrists on the panel very cleverly said, instead of calling these sort of ultra processed foods and things that we're so addicted to, foods, call them what they are, and they're recreational drugs. And I think that was a very appropriate concept to actually say these are actually recreational drugs, treat them as such. And we know what happens when people are on recreational drugs. They tend to abuse them, and it takes over the life in many cases. And so that obviously is kind of what you're describing. I want to add, you mentioned your bones, because as an orthopedic guy, I'm always interested in bones. So how did you know they were poor quality? Did you have a DEXA scan? And have you rechecked, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I have rechecked up until the last couple of years, lockdown, closure, that sort of thing, that kind of put the halt on getting tested anyway. But by that stage, I'd gone off the whole idea of testing for it. I wasn't seeing huge improvements. Even I probably tested at the start of carnivore and then maybe 18 months into carnivore, which, as I've admitted, the first 6 months was strict. The second year was still sugar and chocolate. And I didn't see huge improvement. I think my hip improved or my spine improved, but my hip didn't. So the results were mixed. I think it's too soon. And I think now it doesn't matter. I'm not even interested in continually checking for it. I haven't broken bones, touch wood, that continues. I simply put my energy now into being 100% carnivore as much as I can, enjoy the lifestyle. I do resistance training. I'm back into that, and I don't know what I can be doing, Shawn. I'm not going to take the drugs that they recommended to me maybe 10, 15 years ago when I first discovered this, thank God, because they have bad side effects. And so I don't have a before and after to say that this is where I'm at. Maybe in another 5 years or in a few years or whatever, I might, out of curiosity, go and do it. But I read that actually it's more effective to avoid broken bones in your older age is actually your muscle strength. Just don't fall down in the first place. Be strong. And so that's where my focus is.
And secondarily, yes, you have better ability to save yourself from a fall with better muscle strength. The muscles pulling on those bones continuously are going to eventually strengthen.
Sure. And actually, one thing I should say about that, Shawn, is I've found a beautiful low-carb doctor in Melbourne, Dr. Leon Tan. And when I went carnivore, I was a little sheepish about telling him I was just only eating meat. But I did. He's a beautiful doctor I can talk to. And so I told him, and the first thing that came out of his mouth, you couldn't do anything better for your bones.
Yeah. No.
So that just gave me the confidence, go, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is my approach.
So you were making a living as a chocolatier. When did you decide, okay, this is not compatible with my health anymore? Was it because I assume you stopped doing that, right?
So I gave up sugar. I gave up eating it before I gave up the business. So essentially, the last 18 months of running the business, I tried to wind it down. And I just said to myself, if I can't go into the kitchen and not lick a spoon, not taste a chocolate, I'll close my doors tomorrow. But it suited me business-wise to wind the business down. And so I succeeded. I worked as a chocolatier for 18 months without eating any chocolate. And I think that was quite a feat, right? But it was more that morally and integrity-wise, I didn't feel comfortable making and selling a product that I knew was not healthy, that I now knew was not healthy. And so it was just integrity wise. I'm like, no, this doesn't feel good. So I literally closed my doors for that. I was very unpopular with family and friends who used to love the fact that I had beautiful chocolate to give away. So that just closed.
Did you, and I assume there's like a community of chocolatiers that you associate with, and maybe there's events and things like that. Do you know many other ones? And do you think most of them tend to have this sugar addiction? Do you think a lot of them do?
Some you can tell by their physique, by their body composition, that they're clearly metabolically unwell, whether it's chocolate or sugar or carbs or whatever. Some are chefs and they've come from a chef, like a patissier background, and they're very big people. And you're like, okay, this isn't working for you. I can't say I didn't know people intimately in the profession in that regard. I studied in Europe. I did master classes in chocolate making in Belgium and France and Switzerland. And thinking of those guys who were professional chocolatiers, most of they looked in pretty good shape. Now, metabolically, they may not have been, but they certainly weren't obese or anything like that. So I don't really know that I can comment on that aspect, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because some people become alcoholics and some people can drink alcohol and not. And it's an interesting and probably similar with sugar and chocolate and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I know you're here in the States right now, but back home you're in Victoria somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where, but don't you have a little bit of a farm now or something like that? And how did that evolve? Or did you always have that?
I do. And actually, you've reminded me of the other reason I went carnivore. So I bought the farm 5 years ago, 20 acres of beautiful farmland, an hour outside of Melbourne. And I have horses and alpacas. I had an allergic reaction, like a really bad anaphylactic reaction. I mentioned I used to have seasonal allergies, and I just thought that was normal, right? Like all the other things. And I had a very bad anaphylactic reaction when the grass hay got cut the very first year, a couple of months after I bought the property. And that was the other thing I'd heard through your work and the podcast I was listening to, that carnivore could help seasonal allergy. And I thought, okay, that's another reason to do this, because I've just bought a farm and now I'm allergic to the grass. Really, that's not going to work well for me. So I went carnivore about 4 months after I bought the farm, just by good luck. So yeah, I always lived in a beautiful part of Victoria. It was a very mountainous, foresty part. Maybe think, I don't know what to relate it to, but it's like a temperate rainforest. It was good. But it got to the point where I wanted to move to a bigger property, more animals, less people not a big fan at that time. And so I jumped. I decided to downsize. My retirement wasn't downsizing. It was actually, retiring onto 20 acres, because I figured it gives me everything that I want to remain happy at that stage, was activity, outdoors, animals, projects. I couldn't imagine retiring in a small suburban house in the city. What am I going to do? But on the farm, I bought a tractor and I bought animals. And now the future, of course, is to buy some meat animals. And I'm sure that's in my future, to use the land in that regard, particularly for food security.
Yeah. Was that this whole animals and farming and things like that, was that any in your background at all, or was this just totally new? I'm just going to go into this without any kind of knowledge.
Yeah, totally new. So in case you haven't noticed, I'm not a moderator on life generally. So I would all go hard and get to the top, what I felt was the top of whatever I was doing, and then start from the bottom again, because I love the learning phase of stuff. I really do. When I was packing up my office after 10 years in university life, I thought, going through the old papers and books and manuscripts and whatever, the glory years were those beginning, clawing your way up, and your first book and your first appearance and conferences and whatever. So for me, the farm was like that. I always loved animals. I always loved the countryside. I learned to rock climb and snow ski and whatever the first time I was in America decades ago. I've done a lot of backpacking. I've done a lot of really long trips. So I'm a physical person, but it was just, gives me an opportunity to really live an interesting, fun life. So, no farming background. I always wished I'd grown up on a farm. And then I wished that I had a partner or was married to a farmer or knew somebody could just ease into somebody else's farm. And then just before I turned 60, I'm like, you know what? If I don't do this myself, it's probably not going to happen. And it's going to be a lot harder if I wait another 10 years. And so I started looking around for properties and knew nothing about horses, knew that I didn't have to run it as a business. I think that would take a lot more knowledge than I have. I'm doing it as a hobby farm. That makes it quite doable. I bought from a beautiful farmer who was 80 when she left the farm, and she'd been running it single-handedly for 18 years after her husband passed away. And she had Arab horses that she was breeding. She had up to 22 horses at the time. She was 80. She just stopped splitting wood. She just stopped riding. And that was inspirational to me. I want to be like that when I'm 80. I want to be that person. So if I'm 60, I've got 20 years in theory that I could work and live on this farm.
Yeah, and it's not an inconsequential decision, obviously, and it requires a great deal of physicality, like you mentioned. And I'm just wondering, how do you feel the diet has either facilitated that or maybe not? I don't know. Do you feel like you're stronger and more robust and vigorous now that you've given up all the sugar and are doing carnivore?
Oh, Shawn. So there's the physical aspect of, yes, physical strength, muscle tone, body composition. There's the mental health of not being depressed, of being motivated, of being confident, of even taking this on and doing it single-handedly. But it's more than that. And I really wanted the opportunity to say it. And I haven't even thanked you yet for the opportunity to talk to you, because you, with what you've done and others in this field, but particularly you've helped me change my life. So yes, the physical improved. Yes, the mental health improved, but it's been more than that. It's been, for me, carnivore has just now, the last 3 years in particular, I'm coming up on 5 years carnivore in about 3 months. The last 3 years of being carnivore has transformed my life. Let's say my life is transformed, and I think carnivore is a very big part of that. And so it's transformed in that I have the confidence to travel again, to fall in love again and be in a relationship with a carnivore who I met on this platform. So thank you, Shawn. We're forever indebted. I hadn't been in a relationship for 16 years. I'd closed the door on that. It was easier to just go, okay, that didn't work out that well. My fault and just life. Let's just not go there again. Married my cat, as most of the people who know me here know. And here I am, stepping out, meeting wonderful people, meeting you and other great people at KetoCon just recently, and having all sorts of adventures and new possibilities, considering having meat animals. There's a whole project, a new way of learning, eating the beautiful smoked meats in Texas and going, yeah, I want a piece of that. Let's buy a smoker when I get home and learn how to smoke my own meat. It's just opportunities have opened up that I don't even recognize who I am. I've still got that drive to learn, to get good at stuff, to keep improving myself and my life. But carnivore has now made it possible. It's almost like when I was a kid, I used to just eat and then run off and play my sport, and eating was a bit of an inconvenience. And I feel like I'm back in that spat, which, as we call it, that space is food freedom. I eat and I go do stuff. And in fact, Ray Nazon, beautiful coach who is with you here for a long time and now doing fabulous work with his chisel program, he saved me from the weeds. I'd been carnivore for 18 months or more, probably 2 years. And when I got onto this platform, I was going a little crazy with too much measuring, blood sugars and ketones, and I was trying high fat and higher protein and intermittent fasting and some extended fasting and salt and no salt. And I was making myself completely crazy, right? Even as a carnivore. And Ray, bless him, was the one who took me up metaphorically by the shoulders and gave me a good shaking. And it's like, why are you doing carnivore? And I'm like, because I want to stay safe and strong and keep running the farm and enjoy that lifestyle, healthy and strong, into my later years, 70s, 80s, beyond, whatever. And he said, just eat meat and go live life. And that was great advice. And you say that a lot to people too. Just don't get in the weeds too much, just if it's working. So it's working for me. I'm healthy. I feel energetic. I'm happy. My relationships are great. I don't need the testing anymore. I don't need to know. Yes, I get blood tests and my blood panels look great. I don't need to get my bones tested. I'm doing everything I feel I can do for them. So I am just going and living life. And this food freedom is just, it's so new to me. And I look back at my 20s and 30s where life was quite tumultuous, particularly in the area of relationships and my relationship with myself. And I think, wow, how easy that would have been if I hadn't been on that sugar roller coaster in particular.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that you'd mentioned. You can just go eat and then go live your day. And many of us, for years, you eat your breakfast, what's for lunch? You eat lunch, what's for dinner? And then there's 3 snacks in between.
Sure.
And then you're constantly thinking about recipes and constantly thinking about, you're just constantly thinking about food. And this is something where my decision making is I walk out the freezer, what kind of steak do I want? Throw it in there and that's it. I literally spend not even more than about 3 seconds a day making decisions around food.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, it is very freeing. And people say it's restrictive, but I'd say it's the opposite. It's very freeing.
Yeah, absolutely. But friends of ours that we're staying with, beautiful friends, commented last night that she's loving the fact that I'm eating 100% carnivore, but we're still, and my partner, but we're still having fun with food. Like we're finding ways to still enjoy food and still be foodies and still find interesting recipes and ways of doing that. Because for us, we like variety still. I do need a bit of variety within carnivore, and I like to do things in the kitchen. So to do carnivore croissants and to do carnivore egg bites and to do this, get into the smoked meats and whatever, that's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, there's literally thousands of animal-only recipes you can do. You can utilize if you want to. I'm pretty lazy. I'm just like this. I just want a steak, and I don't want to spend an hour fixing something. Every once for my kids, I might do something like that. But for me, it's just give me a steak, and I'm good to go. Let me ask you, what does a carnivore diet look like for you today, 5 years into this or nearly 5 years into it? What is it? What is a daily, weekly, whatever food consumption, dairy, no dairy? You mentioned salt, no salt. Where are you at right now? What does your diet look like?
Yeah. So for me, the optimum is, yes, I love steaks, and quite often I won't fuss around with anything else other than buying a primal cut of what you call ribeye or sirloin. What do you call it? We call it porterhouse. I've forgotten what you call it now. New York strip. Yeah. So one of those 2 cuts. So I'll buy a primal, I'll slice a steak off it and I'll cook it and I'll eat it. I'll cook 2 steaks and I'll have some leftover cold meat. I really like cold steak occasionally too. So it's basically steak, eggs. I come and go with eggs. I went crazy over eggs and I ate so many within a 6-month period. I think there was something in the eggs that I really needed. And then I backed off from that. But yeah, steak, eggs, tiny bit of pork, bacon I love, fish occasionally, love raw fish sashimi. Chicken generally doesn't do it for me at all, but very occasionally maybe some chicken wings, some soup or broth. Dairy, I've got to be careful with as an ex-sugar addict, recovered sugar addict. Dairy can be problematic for me, particularly the soft dairy, so cream, basically cream and soft cheeses. I can overdo it and that can ramp up. I don't feel as ideal. I feel ideal on steak and eggs and a bit of bacon and occasional fish. It's pretty easy. I do a lot of, the other thing we said about food freedom is also not having to eat. If the day's busy or I just want to get out on the farm and I work for whatever hours, like food isn't, I can keep going and my energy level is the same. Even if I'm not eating for 36 hours, it's just crazy. So there is intermittent fasting. I'll eat when I'm hungry. So sometimes I wake up in the morning and I am hungry and I'll make a steak or eggs or something. Most of the time I'd probably start eating later in the day, 1 or 2 meals, generally no snacks. Simple.
I tend to ask this just to be complete, but downsides to the diet. Have you experienced any physical, mental downsides? I'm sure there's inconveniences, but any major downsides to doing this, or is it generally pretty much all upside?
Grease in the kitchen, little annoying, but deal with that with an auto grill. Annoying my vegetarian sister, 60-year vegetarian sister, dealt with that one. We got over that. When she told me she was really worried I wasn't eating any vegetables, I countered back and said, I'm really worried you don't eat any meat.
Good on you.
And she's my big sister who worries about me. And she's, oh, wow, I've never thought of it that way. So there's a truce in that war. That's all good now. There's no downside mentally, physically, zero downside. The longer I do this, the deeper the healing, I'm sure. I felt immediate benefits in weeks. I felt more benefits in months. I keep feeling more benefits as the years go on. It's crazy. And it's almost like it's endless. So I don't know where it stops, but I feel amazing. I feel the best I've ever felt in my life, mentally, physically, spiritually. I'm having a ball. I don't think I've been in better shape, but I know I can be in better shape if I keep doing this even longer and I keep working at the things that I know are good for me. As you witnessed me do an ice bath, Shawn, I don't hate you, even though I told you I did when I was in the ice bath. I did cold showers for a year. I'm trying to get more into the breathing with the workshops here with some great coaches. So there's still lots of stuff. There's meditation and there's all sorts of things to continually improve my health. And I'm always eager for that. I am going to be that 80-year-old or that 90-year-old, that 100-year-old doing stuff that is athletic and that you're mentally well and strong. That's my aim. That's where I see myself. I just don't see my future as any different. Touch wood, it happens. If it doesn't, what the heck? I've done my best. So that's where I'm at. It can't be better.
Yeah, one of the things you said, obviously feeling great is wonderful, but then, you know, particularly as we all age and we look around and we look at people in our cohort, you look at other people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're not doing very good. And you just start to stand out more and more as you maintain good mental health, good cognitive abilities, because that's another thing that we accept people when they get older, that they're forgetful and their mental health deteriorates. And I think that's another under talked about part of this, that preserving that, because that's when you can't effectively communicate or think, your quality of life is dramatically diminished, not to mention all the physical stuff that you're dependent upon like I said, I don't want to be the guy that needs someone to carry my luggage up to the room, or I just don't see that happening. But yeah, good on you. What about people around you that knew you before? You mentioned your family was a little disappointed you're not pumping out the free chocolate for them anymore, but are they noticing an improvement in your overall health? Has that been something is your vegetarian sister not seeing this, or what's going on?
No. So she thinks that I love her very much, but she thinks that we're genetically, different in that we've had the same biological parents, but I tend to look more physically like my father's build, and she's more like my mum's side of the family build. So she just, I think, thinks it's a genetic difference. The biggest impact I had on people around me was when I first lost that weight in a short period of time, relatively short period of time. And so people saw me drop 35 pounds in a couple of months and like, wow, what have you done? What are you doing? And so there were a number of, and that was just cutting out sugar and chocolate. Remember, it wasn't even low carb. So that had the biggest impact on the people around me. And I did influence at that time. A year later, when I'm still lean, 10 years, 11 years later, that I'm feeling even better, they just think this is my natural build, and I haven't done anything in particular. It's just my genetics or something. So no, I'm not influencing them in that regard. I definitely have influenced people who have somehow been open to keto, low carb, or looking at their health and not accepting where they're at, to then go, what are you doing? You're doing what? Like, how does that work? And then they'll look into it themselves. And certainly there have been a number of friends and acquaintances, like strangers, who you get into conversation with. As if they've taken that first step, I think it's really hard if they haven't been open to challenging the narrative. If they're still taking the drugs, they're still accepting the diagnosis, accepting what the doctors say is going to be inevitable, it's really hard, I think, to shift them. But once they start to go, I'm actually not happy about taking medication the rest of my life. I'm actually not happy about accepting that I'm in this situation. What more can I do? If the door is just ajar a little bit, I think then they can really be influenced by this. And then there's the longevity thing to say, yeah, I haven't eaten vegetables basically for 5 years. I'm great. I don't have scurvy. It's all good. I go to the bathroom. In fact, I go to the bathroom better than on the old diet, because I used to suffer with constipation, and now I don't. That's all good. Thank you very much. But the other annoying thing is they never quizzed me or questioned me when my diet was like 95% sugar and chocolate. When I was doing my doctorate, I actually figured out if I didn't cook and eat food and I just ate Tim Tams, which are an Australian chocolate biscuit, I would have 2 hours extra a day for my research. I actually figured it out. I didn't see the downside at the time.
Yeah, and I've had a Tim Tam when I was. I think we had imported some, and my ex-spouse used to live in Australia briefly, and remember she liked those things as well. And so I think we ordered one time. So I've tried them. So they're not bad. They're not, like I said, they're not a ribeye steak. How difficult is it for you in Australia to do this? Is it because a lot of people will criticize it's too expensive? We have a lot of people in the U.S., and I know what things cost in the U.S. because I live here, but as far as Australia, I was in the UK and it wasn't that bad. I thought we're out in the country in the UK, it was very easy. But how is it for you there in Australia when you're there to do this?
Super easy, super easy. I'm saving money. Sure, if you work out the per pound of vegetables, the cost would be pretty high in terms of kilograms or pounds and calories and that sort of thing. But essentially, by cutting out my junk food, I've saved a heap, let alone nutrients. What are they called? Supplements. I was on a lot of supplements, seeing naturopaths, paying for all sorts of alternate medical stuff to try and feel better. I'm way ahead financially. I don't eat as much. I don't have to eat as often. So if I eat a steak or two, it might be like 2 days of food. In the past, I was stopping and buying at the worst of my sugar addiction. I don't know what I would have been spending a day on junk food, $10, $15 easily. I'd stop and get 3 or 4 or 5 chocolate bars, several packets of stuff. It was out of control, and you cut out. But then, and even on keto, that was more expensive because I was eating a lot of nuts, macadamia nuts, and buying specialist olive oil and avocado oil and almond things with nuts. So just when you just eat meat and you just eat animal food, the cost is nothing compared to what I used to pay for all of the stuff I had to do to keep satisfied and not be hungry and whatever.
Yeah, and I've
heard. Easy. But I'm going to regenerative farming now. That's the other fabulous new thing that's opened up for me just recently. I got introduced to the Beef Initiative through the work of Texas Slim, who you've interviewed. He got brought out to Australia by friends of mine, and we started the Australian Beef Initiative. And so that's as shake your rancher's hand. We call them farmers. Just shake a farmer's hand, find out where your food comes from. So it's taken me a while. I feel like I've been a little slow off the mark in that regard, nearly 5 years carnivore, and I've just recently eaten my very first fresh off the farm lamb. It was incredible. The difference was amazing. I haven't yet purchased my first lot of fresh cow from these regenerative farmers. I'm going to do that as soon as I get back. Bought a big freezer, and that is another step up. It's not so much like the grass-fed, the conventional fed, whatever. To me, eat the meat you love and you can afford. I absolutely subscribe to that, and that's what I've been doing. But now that I've got into the regenerative farming folks, I love that. I want to support that. I want to eat the animals that is one animal. If I'm buying what you call ground beef, minced meat, I actually don't want the genetics of 200 animals in that hamburger patty. I'd rather know that I'm eating one cow and where it's come from. So that's a whole new adventure for me.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think it's just having come back from the UK and spending time in the countryside where they've been farming the same way for, millennia. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful countryside. I think the animal agriculture, as done that way, is what's sustaining that in many ways. Let me ask you, as a sugar addict, as a recovering sugar addict, and I think you have to, just like an alcoholic, you always have to say, this is what I am and this is what I have to deal with. How would you, because there's other people either listening in the community today, in our little community here, or that are going to be listening and watching this, what are the things you think have been helpful for you, or you think people should consider to beat that? You've got 3 things, looks like, or something like that. What do you think are the keys to being able to deal with this appropriately?
I'm going to assume that you go carnivore, right? Because you've got to cut off the supply. You've got to cut off the drug. So abstinence, community, and gratitude, like dealing with the reason that you're going to that drug. That's what it took for me. And the progress for me was not instantaneous. It wasn't that I became a carnivore and, I'm no longer a sugar addict. No, I went carnivore, and the bouts of dipping back into sugar got further and further apart. I stayed down there less time until it just petered out. And in fact, I felt the shift where maybe 3 years into carnivore, I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with that. Not that I haven't dipped into it a couple of times since there, but it was a real shift in my spirit. Like, I'm really done. So the community was an aspect that I didn't have in the past when I was fighting it. And that has been huge. And that helps with that third thing that I said about gratitude and dealing with why you're actually overeating, whatever it is you're overdoing. All of us know. For some people it's bread, for some people it's pasta. For me it was chocolate, not even just sugar generally, but chocolate. I can even eat something a little that might have sugar in it, but it doesn't do me in. But if I have chocolate, it just does me in, like in a spiritual sense. There's something that really just does not work for me. So the gratitude, I started writing daily gratitudes when I started that sugar-free revolution course. And the first it took 3 months before I could come up with 5 written gratitudes that I was grateful to myself for. How sad is that, right? It was tough. I could be grateful to outside people and things in my life, but I could not say that I was grateful to myself, for myself. And that created a real shift. I used to be a very pessimistic person. And people who know me now get surprised by that because I'm very optimistic and I've developed a lot of faith. And over these last 3 years, which have been tough in the world, I have had to battle that a lot to have faith and positivity. But having gratitude shifted my mental internal dialogue so much. So if people used to say, like, I can still remember when I was in deep depression and those sort of grief years, people greet you. They don't really want to know how you are, but in Australia, it's always, hi, how are you? And I would internally, I wouldn't respond, or they'd say, good morning, good afternoon. And I'd just say morning. I'd say afternoon. I wouldn't even put the word good in there because internally my thinking was still just so negative. No, I'm not good. No, I'm not happy. No, I've got all this negative feeling about myself. And so once I started writing these gratitudes every day for about 3 years, and I still do it 10 years later, but I did it like every day, 10 gratitudes for 3 years. It's like I pre-rehearsed these positive things that my focus was now on. So somebody says, how are you? What are you doing? These 10 kind of things were immediately in my head that I'd already rehearsed. And so it's part of focusing on the positive, and then you start to see more positive. It was a huge shift for me. Yeah. So those 3 would be my takeaways.
Great. That was wonderful. And I think it'll help a lot of people. Lark, we've got a few minutes left. Where's Lark going to be in 10 years? If you have your druthers, if things work out for you like you want them to, what do you think 10 years from now we're going to be hearing about? And hopefully I'm hearing about it.
Hopefully. I plan for you to be. I plan to be part of this community somewhere, whatever it's going to look like. 10 years, I'll be living with my partner. Just a hint, he's watching. Somewhere in a country where we can live with freedom, right? That we can live our lives the way we want to, which is fresh food, fresh water, some human freedoms there. That would be my wish. And that I'm strong and capable and fit and healthy and kicking butt for my age group, whatever. Then I'll be I'm 63 now, so I'll be 73. That's just going to be easier to beat the opposition, as you say, because they're all looking worse and we're looking better. So I'd be into probably some senior sports, as I am now. I just played pickleball for the first time last week, and I'm already complete, I'm going to do this. This is fun. So I see myself having a super active life and being basically, I think as we get older in this community, we maybe have more opportunity to influence people because, as you say, what we look like compared to our cohorts just gets wider and wider. I went to an optometrist just to get some new contact lenses when I was in America last year, and he gave me the medical form to fill out what medications you're on, what operations have you had, what conditions have you got, and it was like nil. And he said, geez, you wouldn't fit in this country. I don't want to fit in. I love being different. It was hard at first to be different and stand out and be strong and take a little criticism or making people feel a little uncomfortable themselves when you're not eating the junk. Now I embrace it.
Yeah, great sentiment. It's if you're worried about being considered unusual or an extremist, you're like, what is it compared to? And do I want to be average? And the answer is, hell no, I don't want to be average if I've got to be like everyone else. So Mark, thank you so much for doing this. And go ahead, and we always appreciate you being part of the community. Look forward to, like I said, you continuing to have success. Thanks so much. And I'm hoping I get down to Australia in the next couple of years. And if you're down there, I'll have to come say hi and stuff.
Good. I have it on record. Beautiful. It was fabulous meeting you at KetoCon. Can I just say, honestly, I'm so grateful to you. Thank you. I love the work that you do, and you have changed lives, and my life is one of them. So thank you so much. Love your work.
Certainly, I appreciate it. And like I said, it's on all of us. So like I said, as all of us, this doesn't work without community, as you mentioned. This is a grassroots thing. And so it's not on one or two people. It's on millions of us to do this. So anyway, thanks everybody. Happy Memorial Day for you guys that are in the U.S. and have a great rest of your day. And I will be back tomorrow. So thanks everybody. Bye, Lark. Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. If you guys are enjoying these success stories, you can become your own success story. You can do that by heading over to CarnivoreDiet. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial and get started today. We're looking forward to supporting you. Our community is wonderful, and we'd love to see your success.